What if I told you that there was a single number that could predict how long you're going to live, how well you will age, and how sharp your brain will stay? That number is your VO2 max, and chances are we're not paying enough attention to it. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing VO2 max and its effect on health and longevity, how it affects it, and more importantly, how you can improve it. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Chemist Couple podcast with me, Jess, and Lee. We're both clinical pharmacists and we work in GP practices in the northwest of England. So let's get into the episode. So VO2 max. I think it's one of those topics, isn't it, that 20 years ago you probably didn't really hear much of it, and now that people are more conscious about their health and most importantly their health span rather than the lifespan, it's definitely something that is come to fruition within the longevity health space, and a lot of people are talking about it at the moment, aren't they?
They are. I mean, people are aware of zone 2 training.
Yeah.
I think that's been around or in circulation longer than VO2 max. But we always look at how we should be exercising. And we did a podcast episode before Christmas. And I don't think we capitalised enough because we just generally spoke about how we think you should exercise.
Yeah.
But then this week we went into the fundamentals of aerobic capacity, we went into strength training, and VO2 max is something that keeps popping up. And we've looked into it a bit more. It is something that I am going to look into again in the future, and I think we'll revisit it probably in a couple of months.
Yeah.
But I do think it's probably one of the biggest predictors to longevity.
Yeah, so I heard that VO2 max was the greatest predictor of longevity, closely followed by grip strength. So obviously, when you look at that, I remember a couple of weeks ago we did a podcast where we were discussing we were ranking basically different things to do with health. Things to do with health. And we ranked them whether we thought which one was most important to which one was the least important. And two of them topics were, one of them was nutrition and the other one was exercise. Now, you actually said exercise is the most important. I said nutrition. But when you just think about what I've just said in terms of VO2 max and then grip strength being the top two predictors, it may seem that exercise actually might be the most important.
It is. Now, there's a famous study that was done that actually wasn't a study, I believe, and it was the bus conductor and driver, sort of the comparison between cardiovascular disease and I think it was just general all-cause mortality. Yeah. And the good thing about this study was it wasn't initiated like a medical study, so these people just carried on doing what they were doing in their daily life. Yeah. I think it was a post-war.
Yeah, it was just after World War II, I think.
It was. And basically they found out that the bus conductors had a reduced chance of all-cause mortality than the bus driver. Yeah. But in reality, they probably lived similar lives. They probably went to the pub, smoked the same amount, which is why when you interpret that in a modern day, it's quite significant. Because if we run a trial now, the effects of exercise, let's say, we don't know whether that's due to your job being less stressful, whether you're having a better house, better nutrition. There's so many confounding factors where back then, especially because they were just being observed, I think it just shows how important exercise is.
Definitely. I really like that study and it is very interesting.
There was also something else with the Boston Marathon runner.
I didn't think I've heard this one.
I think he was born in the 1800s, late 1800s. Yeah. He won 7 marathons. I heard on a podcast with Mike Joyner and Peter Attia, the 2 doctors in America, and they were wondering, he died at 70 with stomach cancer, but then when he had an autopsy, they found out that he had significant atherosclerosis of the coronary arteries, and they were wondering how that didn't kill him sooner, and it was the stomach cancer. And they found out that his coronary arteries were basically twice the size of the average person, and it was able to dilate in diameter, that is, and it was able to dilate. So this plaque that would have normally engulfed a normal person's coronary artery, this was just merely blocking a tiny bit. And that's where exercise probably has this extra level where it can improve endothelial function, and there's so many different things. And we're not saying to neglect all the other components of your health, but exercise does seem to be.
Of course, and I think we do discuss a lot on the podcast that you need to do everything in moderation, and I feel like there's sort of this wheel that I think of in my head when I think about health as like an overall thing, and nutrition is one part of it. Obviously exercise is another, stress management is another, sleep is another, and then also maintaining relationships and that sort of comes into stress. But I think that, all of those things, building connections, overall they contribute to health. But definitely exercise we need to give it a lot more credit, or we need to look at it a lot more than potentially what we do. And I wanted to say that because when we were looking at VO2 max, it's definitely not something that we ever learn in university. It's definitely not something that we tell our patients to improve or we discuss with patients.
No.
And when you think about it being the actual biggest predictor of overall health and longevity, we should really be speaking about it and we should be learning about it. So, this obviously episode of this podcast is hopefully going to teach, us some things and then also the people listening. So I wanted to start off then by saying, what is VO2 max?
You explain it all, me.
I don't mind. So I'll read off what it actually says. So VO2 max represents the maximum amount of oxygen in mils per kilogram of body weight per minute that the body can use. So it basically reflects the efficiency of our heart, our lungs and muscles in oxygen delivery. People who have a higher VO2 max have a less chance of cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders and all-cause mortality. So why is oxygen important? Like, why are we even talking about oxygen?
Well, we require it for respiration and processes within the body.
Yeah.
And the main one for me is energy production.
Yeah.
So in the mitochondria of most cells, that's where you make ATP, which is the cell's currency for energy. So if you take glucose, for example, if you were to burn it, you would give off, I think it's 686 calories, 180 grams a mole of it. But in the body, we do it in such a strategic way that we can release energy at certain points and we package that energy so it's not lost as all of it as heat. And that package is ATP. And with oxygen, it enables us to do that. Yeah. But then a lot of people will be aware of when we train intensely or there's no oxygen present, we can anaerobically respire, which is basically the body's way of still maintaining energy production. It's very inefficient, but it still allows us to function at that level. And the whole point of VO2 max is that if we can increase this efficiency of the body to utilize oxygen, it just makes everything else a lot easier.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things when you look at a chart, so you said about longevity, you can actually look at what function, what VO2 max you require at a certain age to then have a certain function.
I think we'll pop, if anyone's actually watching this on video, a little picture up where it gives a graph or it's a table where it'll tell you what your VO2 max should be for your age group. And I think one of the things that so there's ways that you can test it, which we will get into. And one of the things that I sort of learned whilst looking at VO2 max is that really we need to try and maintain a level of VO2 max. So even if we think, oh, our VO2 max is the equivalent of someone who is like 10 years younger than me, really just trying to keep it high is going to be beneficial. So
yeah,
we'll put that up.
But that's the thing, I think a lot of people might get confused. So VO2 max is the maximum volume. So this is when you are working at your maximum output. It's not something that should be at rest. So if you measure your oxygen efficiency at rest, it's probably going to be 10, 20 times less than your true volume. And people might confuse it with, I think it's tidal volume, the actual term, and that's the amount that you're able to inspire and expire within one cycle. And it's not that. It's how efficient we can use the oxygen per minute from the air that we breathe in.
Yeah. And I think why it's important is that and why we need to improve our VO2 max in terms of longevity is because it does have an effect on how well our muscles can utilize oxygen, and then also, but mainly the mitochondria, which is an organelle within the cell, which is known as like the powerhouse. Now, as we age, mitochondrial function goes down, and what happens is that we get an increase in what we call reactive oxygen species. So these are very like high energy particles that sort of wreak havoc within your body, and they can cause things like cancers. They can cause neurodegeneration, which is degeneration of your brain, leading to things like Alzheimer's. And so if we can improve our VO2 max, it does improve mitochondrial function, and then also it'll decrease reactive oxygen species. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else that would be linked to longevity in the way that it works. But there are so many studies out there that do say they've come up with the same conclusion, that a higher VO2 max is linked to longevity and a healthier lifespan, decrease in all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease. Now, I do know that a lot of the studies are done over a very short period of time, aren't they?
Yeah, I was going to say that. Normally 12 to 18 weeks.
Yeah. Okay, so there are so many studies out there about VO2 max, which we obviously haven't looked into all of them. And like we said at the beginning of the podcast, we are going to look more into VO2 max over the coming months. But one of the studies that I did look at, which stood out to me, was that if you increase your VO2 max by 3.5 mils per kilo per minute, then you reduce your all-cause mortality risk by 12%. And in a second study that was conducted that I looked at, it was basically comparing people, or it was putting people in a group where they had to do HIIT exercises. So if anyone's ever done that, it stands for high intensity interval training, where you'll do bouts of very high intensity exercise and then rest. And so in those groups of people, I think it was actually over 8 weeks, they increased their VO2 max by 13%. So if you look at my VO2 max now, we worked it out not very accurately. Again, we'll put up maybe somewhere here where we'll tell you how you can work it out very basically. So like I say, it's not very accurate, but just to give you a ballpark figure, mine was 43. And so the way that we do that is you use your own pulse. So you can check that easily by, you just like literally put your hand, if you're watching this, you'll be able to see me doing it. You put your 2 fingers just sort of like, just above your thumb, really, isn't it?
Yeah, an inch away from your thumb on your wrist, your radial pulse, isn't
Radial pulse, and you'll be able to feel your heartbeat, or you should be able to feel your heartbeat if you've got good circulation. And then you can either measure it, how many beats there are in 20 seconds, and then times it by 3, or you can use how many beats there are per minute, and that'll give you your heart rate. But anyway, I worked it out, and mine was 43, my VO2 max. So if you are increasing it by 13% over 8 weeks, then that would be, for me, well, if I'm going about 10%, that's like 4.3 mils. Now that's above the 3.5 mils, which is going to decrease my all-cause mortality by 12%. Do you get what I mean? So obviously, even after an 8-week period, even though we do say that VO2 max is measured and is improved over a long period of time, even by doing just a little bit, you are going to improve it a significant amount if, that study was accurate and correct, which is really interesting.
It is. And I think that's where we need to change a lot in life and in medicine, is that we set the goalposts only a short distance in the future. Yeah. So this 8 to 12 weeks will show this improvement. But if we're doing this over 30, 40 years, you're going to get a greater benefit over a greater duration of time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the problem with a lot of things in health and in life in general. We set it to 5 years in front instead of looking at the overall risk over your lifetime.
Yeah.
Which I think medicine's trying to go to, but it's hard to convey that to people that can't see beyond the horizon.
Definitely. And I think, again, it comes down to this thing that everything in today's modern society it comes very easily. And so we're not really put in positions where we like to do hard things, or we need to do hard things. And obviously, exercise is a lot of effort. Like you were saying this the other day, that it is hard to exercise and to do it consistently, especially when everything else is going on in life. You really need to think about why you want to do it. And we did have a quick discussion about this, didn't we? We said that we wanted to discuss it on the podcast because we said to each other, didn't we, how would we sort of educate people or help people to want to exercise? And we said, what's your sort of opinion on why people have barriers to exercising? So what did you say that yours was? What did you say that you thought the barrier was?
We were just talking about barriers to health, or preventative health in general, and it's all down to this health belief model. And the idea is, if someone, let's say they're 25 and they don't exercise, they are unlikely to have any ill effects from that in the next 12 to 24 months, are they? So they go, okay, well, if I carry on doing what I'm doing, I'm not going to gain any benefit by exercising. And the only time they will change is if they see any imminent danger to their health by not exercising, or they see a potential huge benefit. And that's the only time people will go to a change in their medical, I don't know, lifestyle.
Yeah. And then my idea was sort of that I think the way that I started out anyway on my health journey or my fitness journey and whatever was I just sort of trained myself to do hard things every day. So something that I really didn't want to do, like it could have been, I don't know, like tidying or doing the washing, for instance. I don't like doing it, but I know that it needs to be done. And so I would make myself do something like that every single day. And I think it builds up resilience. And so you then recognise, I've done that now and I feel loads better for doing that task that I didn't want to do. And so by doing that every day and building up resilience, it does make you think, well, if I exercise, I will feel really good, and then I think it just builds this better belief system, and also, you know, good relationship with why you want to exercise, because you know that it's not for the right now, it's going to make me feel 10 times better an hour later, or, you know, but then when it comes to health in 20-30 years time.
That's the thing, isn't it? You alluded to it before in terms of exercising is very inefficient in terms of time. We have tried to, I think, bottle the effects of exercise by increasing mitochondria, but it hasn't had the same profound effects that exercise does have. And when you actually do come to exercise, you want to make sure it's efficient and doing the right things for your health. And I think a lot of the times now, exercising is more for the aesthetics.
Yeah.
But going back, and this is why I feel, well, I felt like I'd missed out when I was reading about VO2 max, because when I train, I do train intense, but then I feel as though I should have been focusing on my aerobic capacity as opposed to strength endurance and all these other components. I feel as though I've been training inefficiently for the past 10 years at least. So the rule of thumb is, if you are looking at training and what's the best thing for you to do, is that you take, let's say, how many hours a week you're going to train. So let's say 6 hours a week. You split that up 50%. The 50% being strength and mobility on one side, and the other one being aerobic capacity. And then of that 50%, so in this case 3 hours, you should split it up into 80% being zone 2. Zone 2 is easy to identify if you've got a watch, but then the best thing is RPE, which is the rate of perceived exertion. And it's this idea that you can hold a conversation, but you want the other person to do a bit more talking. And you should be able to do that. Well, you should be doing that for 80% of that time. And the other 20% should be targeting your VO2 max. Which, do you want to go on to how you do that?
So I think there's a few ways. So we discussed before HIIT training. So there's this notion of 4x4. So it's basically going all out for 4 minutes to like the maximum, like I think it's zone 5, isn't it? So that's like sort of the maximum capacity that you have, where you're exhausted and you can't do anything, like, you know, you're really tired after it, and then resting for the same period of time, so 4 minutes. And then I think, how many times do you do that?
You do that 4 times.
Do you do the 4 times?
But the sweet spot's 3 to 8 minutes, and you should do a 1-to-1 rest. Now, there are other HIIT regimes out there, where I think one's called Tabata. We do it on the cycling, don't we? And that's where you work double the time of your rest. But ideally, I think 4x4 is the easiest one to remember. 4 minutes out, where you can't do any more at the end of it. Rest for the same amount of time and do that. You should aim to do that once a week.
So actually, when they did that study, so that was the HIIT study that I was talking about, where they train people in that way, and that was where they showed a 13% increase in 8 weeks of the VO2 max in that study. So that's one way. The next way is, like you just said, zone 2 training. So that's where, you know, you can't really hold a conversation anymore. So, and then I think that was that, you know, so that could be walking briskly.
That's
obviously
the thing.
It depends between different people, because it does depend on your overall fitness level at that point.
That's why RPE is good. I mean, lactate level is the best way, but who's going to clip their ear during a walk or a cycle? Not many people.
So I think one thing that I've been trying to do over the last couple of weeks is, because I really, again, like yourself, this was before we looked at VO2 max, to be honest, but you know, now I'm definitely going to try and improve it going forward. But I have been incorporating a couple of spin classes a week, where they're like half an hour. But to be honest, I think because we didn't wear a watch, I don't know what zones I'm in at different times. And with the swing classes, as anyone who's done one will know, it's usually like you'll speed up, and then you'll slow your speed, then you'll increase your sort of your resistance, so you'll be working harder. So it's very difficult to sort of determine what zone I'm in for that whole period of time. So I think one of the ways that I'm going to increase it is by walking more. So that's just like basal activity, and you know, like say, walking briskly, so that you are getting a little bit of a sweat on. You can do that anywhere, you know what I mean? Like for half an hour every day, you know, even that, you know, you don't even have to do that much.
It is. Well, I done a zone 2 this afternoon, and it was a lot harder than what I thought. So in terms of a spin bike, I think it was a cadence of 97 to 100, and resistance was 33. And I'd done that for 30 minutes, and that was quite hard at the end of it, I thought. So that's why I think I've not been training zone 2 effectively for me. But then a few people, when you actually try and tell them to train their aerobic capacity, they go about it the wrong way. They go all out intense.
I definitely used to do that.
I mean, I used to a couple of times. I couldn't do a run where I didn't go pretty fast. I mean, fast relative to me. I'm not saying I'm anything. And this idea of, I've heard it a few times, you should build your pyramid. So the base being your zone 2 and your general aerobic capacity, and the peak being your VO2 max. And you can't build a skyscraper with a small base, can you?
No.
And that's the whole thesis around it. And, well, we went on about how you should measure. We didn't go on about how we should measure, should we?
No, so I'm going to go on to that now. So basically, there's also, I think, when we do talk about VO2 max as well, it is important to point out that you said before that 50% should also be strength training, because that will also improve your VO2 max, because it also increases or improves sort of circulation, so that oxygen can get to the muscles like effectively. So
yeah, and you can be in higher zones when you do weight training if you don't take as much rest.
So, it's not just about, oh, well, I just need to improve my VO2 max, I'm just going to go and do like, zone 2 or zone 5 training on walking or on a bike. You do still need to incorporate strength training into
because you'll have sarcopenia, falls risk, all them other things.
Again, it's that thing about what we said at the beginning, where it's such a balance between everything, and it's being like the rounded person rather than focusing on one thing.
Your body does it every single day. It balances itself between the right heart rate, the right blood pressure, everything is in a balance. And it's just finding that individually for you.
So how can you then test your own VO2 max? So I did discuss it a little bit before.
You did. So that was the personal one with the calculation. I don't know how accurate that is.
I don't know how accurate it is now. I just literally got this on Google, but obviously because we don't have access to a lab or the lactate test, that was like what we used. So basically what you do with that is you take 220, which is the maximum heart rate, I think, for anybody.
Yeah, minus your age.
Minus your age. So for us, it would
be 30. That's your maximum heart rate. So
that would, so I'm saying 220 is like the maximum heart rate recorded for a human. I don't know, is it? I don't know, but then
put me under.
Yeah, you minus your age to get your maximum heart rate for your age group. So for us, that would be 190. And then you divide that by your resting heart rate. So for me, I think it was about 72, which mine was a bit high, but I had caffeine. Now, if anyone's watched the caffeine episode, you'll know that possibly could have increased my heart rate. And I was also, I think I'd just come on my lunch, so I'd been like seeing patients all morning, so potentially wasn't accurate. However, you do your maximum heart rate for your age group divided by your resting heart rate, and then you times it by 15.3. So I don't know where that number is come from. Like I say, it was literally on Google. So do not use this as gospel. It's just a very vague ballpark figure if you just want to quickly work it out. So mine came to 43. You did the same, and yours came to
53.
53. Yeah. Was it? And I think for you, you were in the elite age category, or the elite group for your age group. I was in the above average or high. The second one down from elite, I wasn't elite.
But I'll tell you one time where this calculation doesn't work straight away. So you'll probably listen to it with my dad. So he's he's medically induced to have a low heart rate. Yeah. So his calculation's going to come out pretty good. Yeah. He's going to be this. Yeah. Not far behind Mo Farah.
Yeah. And so anyone who is on, and even things like, if you're an asthmatic and you use a salbutamol inhaler, that can affect it.
Of course it can.
There are obviously other drugs that will affect it. So obviously that's all you have to
I wasn't saying that was.
And like I say, caffeine, stress can affect your resting heart rate. The best way, I think, to measure it is if you are wearing a device where it will actually test your resting heart rate over a 24-hour period.
It will.
Potentially. So that might be a better way if anyone has got one of them. It's probably easier, or you may get a more accurate result than what we did.
Yeah. But the best way to check it, if you have access to it, is via a lab.
Yeah, so that is the gold standard.
It is, and basically you put the mask on and you go through different levels of intensity, normally on a treadmill or bike, and I think they come over with a chart and they say how hard is this at this point, and you basically keep going till failure. And that mask, it's really tightly suction to your face, and the idea is it measures the amount of oxygen coming in and the amount of oxygen coming out your body, and then from that they can then work out the fraction that's being utilized, and then you come up with an equation that comes up with the most accurate VO2 max that we've got. Yeah. You can buy masks, I think, to do at home. I did see someone buy one. I think it was £6,000.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Which everyone's not going to do.
I know. I think as well, the lab tests, I'm not sure how much they are, but I think they're really expensive as well. So
I thought they were about £200 to £300. Which is obviously it's not.
It's a lot of money. But,
feasible.
obviously if you are really into your health and you can afford to do that, if we're in a position where we can in the future, I would, think I do want to get it done, because I think with it being the most important
Yeah,
metric for your
definitely.
overall health and health span, longevity, it is important. It is like really good to know, isn't it?
It is. I think a lot of people don't give it enough focus. Well, we definitely haven't. But in terms of, if you do speak to a lot of people, patients, family, whoever, they don't think it's going to happen to them. In terms of, you can say to them, this VO2 max is really important. Your body will decline.
Yeah.
One instance of this is your kidney declines from the age of 20, 21 by 1% a year. That's nothing really you can do about it.
Yeah.
And your VO2 max will decline gradually. So you've got to have it to lose it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that we speak to feel as though they'll lose certain amounts of weight and then they'll improve their aerobic capacity to a level that's going to negate this decline. And that's not what's going to happen. You need to be really in the elite for your age group, in my opinion, or very high for the one prior to you, to then have enough going into later on in life. You've got to have functionality. And if your body can't use oxygen, I think that's a bigger determinant than anything else.
Definitely.
You've got to have it to lose it. So if you've got the capacity to do so now, you should be building it at this point. You shouldn't be leaving it until you're 50, 60, when, let's be honest, you're not going to have the same willpower, because exercise it is time consuming.
But on that note, I would say that if obviously you are 50 and you're listening to this and you think, I do want to improve my health, then there's no better time. Like, just start.
Oh yeah, you will always get a benefit from improving your health. But my point is, if you've got this mindset that I can do it when I'm 50, 60 and not do it now, it's not going to make that much of a difference. It will. It's like with anything, invest in money. Start 20 years earlier. The compounding effect will have such a great influence.
I think, when we started out on this especially the podcast, and changing our lifestyle to fit with sort of looking in the future, prior to that, both of us, I would say, were just focusing purely on aesthetics. We were
definitely
in our late 20s, and obviously you want to look good for each other, and you want to look good to the world. And so it's opened our eyes massively since looking into all of this, that now my main goal and my main focus, the same with you, is getting later into life being healthier, and secondary to that, you will look good anyway. And that's what I always say, to you, and what I want to really try and get across on the podcast is that shift your mindset for why you're doing things. So it's not, don't think about it purely from an aesthetic point of view, because when you get to 40 and you've got 3 kids and you don't really care about aesthetics anymore, then what is the reason for you wanting to do it? There isn't. And so you will just sort of think, oh well, I'm 40 now, I don't need to impress anyone, and it's easier then to just decline, and you don't look after yourself in terms of your exercise or whatever. Whereas if you think about it, well, actually no, it's not, I'm not doing it for that. Like, that's just a bonus. I'm doing it because I want to be healthier when I'm older. It makes it that little bit easier to get up and do it.
It does. I mean, there's a lot of inbuilt cultural things in terms of training. So if I go back to the gym, it was only you done cardio if you wanted to lean out for summer holidays, or a lot of people do it before a competition. When ironically, that should be the underpinning for a lot of people's training, is that the one muscle that continually works every single day without fail is your heart. Why do we neglect it as much as we do? It's the heart and its related diseases are the biggest killer of anyone. 19 million every year, and we just neglect it. We just do it, oh okay, well, we've got a show coming up or we've got a holiday, let's do a few more runs or whatever it might be to lean out. And I think we need to train it. It's probably the most important muscle that should have its own day every day.
Definitely.
But we don't. We'll focus on a bicep or a shoulder muscle instead. Or we'll do something else that really doesn't have the same importance, in my opinion, to your cardiovascular endurance. And that's why I feel as though I've missed out, is that I really should have been paying more attention to that. I don't feel as though I feel any bad effects from not doing it, but I could have been a lot more, enhanced in my performance, at least.
I mean, obviously, it would be ideal, like I say, for us to get a professional VO2 max done, but when we did the one online, you are still in the elite category. I think you only just were, was it, or I don't know, but
I would like to do one to see where it is.
But I think, like we say, you can improve it. Yeah, you can improve it. And so I think maybe now is a good time to maybe summarise in terms of
because we have went all over the place. Before we sat down for this podcast, so the last week we've had a fair amount going on with work, prescribing, courses, whatever, and we've moved a day of recording. So we've looked into this, but then we realised that we really wanted to know more about it. So before we sat down to record it, we were thinking, how should we go about it? And we've just sort of unleashed everything.
Yeah. So VO2 max, like we said, is the strongest indicator for overall health and longevity. If you have a higher VO2 max, you've got a lower risk of cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, and all-cause mortality. Ways that you can improve your VO2 max. So if you're a beginner, then we'd say maybe start with a brisk walk, maybe swimming or cycling. If you think about your week and how often you exercise, half of it should be dedicated to improving your VO2 max or some kind of aerobic exercise. If you're an intermediate, so I would probably class us too as an intermediate, where we train every day but not optimally at the moment for VO2 max, then add in some HIIT sessions, so maybe twice a week, while also maintaining your zone 2 walking, cycling, swimming. If you're an athlete, actually one of the ways that you can improve VO2 max is by training at higher altitudes. So that's all to do with your the increase in EPO, isn't it? Which is like you get more red blood cells, and so your body's able to deliver oxygen because it's got more capacity to basically hold on to oxygen. And yeah, I would say if you are thinking of starting, then definitely do it, because no matter how old you are, you will always increase it. There are certain medications that may affect your VO2 max results, so that's something to be aware of. And then is there anything else that you would like to say?
I'd just like to say that it's completely changed my perception on training, and I think this has come to the top of the list for me. Whereas before it was strength training, maybe mobility, but definitely VO2 max, cardiovascular endurance has gone to the top of my list.
Is that because you don't focus on it though? So in terms of, because I still would I would still say that, like we just said then, half and half. So like you should be doing half dedicated to aerobic training and then half doing strength training.
Strength with stability.
Yeah, I think that they're probably as important to do both together. But
no, they are. You need to, we keep going on about this idea of balance, but in terms of if I had to pick one or the other, I would pick that, because I feel as though we aim for too high of a muscle mass anyway. As long as we've got the ability to maneuver our body weight in a functional way, I think that's more than enough. Whereas we need the ability to keep our heart going all the time.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's changed for me.
Yeah. And so I think with that, then that would really conclude the podcast. So thank you so much to everyone who has got this far, if you have. As always, this podcast is for informational purposes only and shouldn't be used in substitute from seeking advice from a healthcare professional. And we'll catch you at the next one.